Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 1, Text 17. Okay. Bhumir dripta nripa vyaja daityanika shitayutai akranta puribarena Brahmanam Sharanam Yayo. Okay, word for word. Bhumi, Mother Earth. Dripta, puffed up. Nripa Vyaja, posing as kings, or the supreme power personified in the state. Daitya, of demons. Anika, of military phalanxes of soldiers. Shatta ayutai, unlimitedly, by many hundreds of thousands. Akranta, being overburdened. Bhuribarena, by a burden of unnecessary fighting power. Brahmanam, unto Lord Brahma. Sharanam, to take shelter. Yayao, went. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Once when Mother Earth was overburdened by hundreds and thousands of military phalanxes of various conceited demons dressed like kings, she approached Lord Brahma for relief. Purport: when the world is overburdened by unnecessary military arrangements, and when various demoniac kings are the executive heads of state, this burden causes the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, Chapter 4, Text 7, Yada yada dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata bhutanam dharmasya tadatmanam sujamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I appear myself. When the residents of this earth become atheistic and godless, they descend to the status of animals, like dogs and hogs, and thus their only business is to bark amongst themselves. This is dharmasya glani, deviation from the goal of life. Human life is meant for attaining the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, but when people are godless, and the presidents or kings are unnecessarily puffed up with military power, their business is to fight and increase the military strength of their different states. Nowadays, therefore, it appears that every state is busy manufacturing atomic weapons to prepare for a third world war. Such preparations are certainly unnecessary. They reflect the false pride of the heads of state. The real business of a chief executive is to see to the happiness of the mass of people by training them in Krishna consciousness in different divisions of life. Chatur Vanyamaya Shristam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha, Bhagavad-Gita 4.13. A leader should train the people as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, and engage them in various occupational duties, thus helping them progress towards Krishna consciousness. Instead, however, rogues and thieves, in the guise of protectors, arrange for a voting system, and in the name of democracy, they come to power by hook or by crook and exploit the citizens. Even long, long ago, asuras, or persons devoid of God consciousness, became the heads of state, and now this is happening again. Various states of the world are preoccupied with arranging for military strength. Sometimes they spend 65% of the government's revenue for this purpose. But why should people's hard-earned money be spent in this way? Because of the present world situation, Krishna has descended in the form of the Krishna consciousness movement. This is quite natural, for without the Krishna consciousness movement, the world cannot be peaceful and happy. Om Jnanatimandasya Gyananjana Shalakoya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances to his lotus feet. Pumir Dripta Nirpa Vyaja Daityanika Shatayutai Akranta Buribarena Brahmanam Sharanam Yayao. Once when Mother Earth was overburdened by hundreds of thousands of military phalanxes of various conceited demons dressed like kings, she approached Lord Brahma for relief. Hare Krishna. Okay, so this verse is actually basically the beginning of Shukadeva Goswami explaining why Krishna is coming to this planet. And so we've come to this point where actually Parikshit Maharaj in the beginning of the chapter is requesting Shukadeva Goswami to describe Krishna's descent into this earthly planet and coming along with Balaram. And of course we know Bhagavad-Gita, Janma Karma Chame Devyam Evam Yoveti Tatvataha Tyaktam Deham Punarjamam Naitimam Iti Surajuna. That one who understands Krishna's appearance and activities, he doesn't have to take birth in this material world again. And I think I mentioned this in a previous class I gave, that I heard a class where Srila Prabhupada gave this example that if you're flying in an airplane from, say, New York to Los Angeles, this is the example he gave because he was in the US at this time, that before getting on the plane you have to make many preparations. You have to get your clothes ready, make sure you get to the airport on time, etc. And he was saying, so in the same way, we have to prepare ourselves to go from this earth planet to Goloka, or Vaikuntha planets. And he said the way to do this is this verse, Janma Karma Chime Devyam, is to understand Krishna's appearance and activities. It's preparation for us to go to back to the spiritual world. In the last class also that was spoken about yesterday, Shukadeva Goswami, well, first of all, the first verse that Shukadeva Goswami speaks of answering Parikshit Maharaj's inquiry to understand about Krishna's appearance in this world just happened a couple of verses ago. And he says, this is Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. He says, "O your Majesty, best of all saintly kings, because you are greatly attracted to topics of Vasudeva, it is certain that your intelligence is firmly fixed in spiritual understanding, which is the only true goal for humanity." And then he gives the comparison that just like the Ganges emanating from the toe of Lord Vishnu purifies the three worlds, the upper, middle, and lower planetary systems, so similarly questions and answers about the pastimes and characteristics of Lord Vasudeva or Krishna, three varieties of men are purified: the speaker, he who inquires, and the people in general who listen. So I think it was in the second canto, I may be mistaken, but I have it written down in my notes. Prabhupada says in a purport how there were so many topics spoken of in the Bhagavatam, but because of Parikshit Maharaj's intense desire to know about Krishna, you see the 10th canto is the longest canto because of Parikshit Maharaj's serious attention and determination to understand Krishna himself, that he went back to Goloka after he was killed by the snake bird. He went to Goloka Vrindavan. So understanding that this is actually Shukadeva Goswami explaining how your intelligence is firmly fixed in spiritual understanding because your unceasing attraction to the topics of Krishna, and hearing that 3 types of people are purified: the preacher, one who inquires, and the people in general who listen. I must admit, at least for myself, that a lot of the times when I'm asked to speak, oftentimes I'm just repeating the words of my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, or maybe a small realization I have from reading or hearing their words. But much of, I'll just speak for myself, but it might apply to other speakers also. Maybe they may or I may not have so much realization when it comes to high topics, or even things that we hear every day that are repeated in class, like Trinadapi Sunechana, we should be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. I repeat that a lot because Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, my spiritual master. But for myself, I don't have much realization of topics such as Trinadapi Sunechana. But I understand that that's the standard. I understand that that's the ideal. So not wanting to be a hypocrite, if I speak about those things, I will try to strive to emulate those qualities. So I think in this way, this is one of the reasons why the speaker is benefited. Well, first of all, just hearing and chanting about Krishna is obviously purifying, but to speak on the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is such a sublime and divine thing to do that I'm not qualified to do it. But somehow, Srila Prabhupada's mercy, I'm given the opportunity, so I have to rise to the standard. So, like I said, I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I used to wonder, why are there different speakers on the Bhagavatam? There's a different devotee who speaks every day. And I used to think, different devotees have different levels of qualification, different levels of advancement. Wouldn't it just be beneficial if we just heard Srila Prabhupada every day give Bhagavatam class? Because then for sure you're getting the pure thing, absolutely for sure. But as thinking about this, well, first of all, Prabhupada set this up in such a way that different devotees get to speak, and even when he was present, oftentimes he would ask his disciples to speak, and he would sit in the audience and listen. And I came up with a couple things that came to my mind. Is first of all, when someone speaks on the Bhagavatam or speaks Bhagavad-Gita or whatever, it gives impetus for the speaker to actually read the books, try to really understand the philosophy. You don't want to make a fool of yourself, so you have to get into the books. You have to take notes and everything like that. And I was thinking that another reason is that Srila Prabhupada, in numerous occasions, writing letters to his disciples, emphasized that we should understand the philosophy from different angles of vision. He was saying, by studying and by discussing with your God brothers, you'll get an understanding from different angles of vision, because everybody has a different nature, a different inclination, a different way of seeing things. He even said that each and every shloka can be seen in many different angles, and that one should actually practice understanding the philosophy in this way. So one of the things that helps me, at least, I'll read something really quick. This is a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to one of his disciples, where he was encouraging devotees to write. Read the books, understand it, and write. your realizations or what you've understood. And he says that all students should be encouraged to write some article after reading Bhagavatam, Bhagavad-Gita, and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. They should realize the information, he says, and they must present their assimilation in their own words. Otherwise, how can they become preachers? So I think it's very important for devotees when they're reading to really think about, how does this pastime, how does this philosophy that I'm reading apply to my daily life? How have I realized it? What are some things that I can improve on to actually raise to the standard of what I'm reading and speak according to your realizations? And I think that's why it's important for many different devotees to give the Bhagavatam class, because I had that realization. You get to hear other people's realizations and see things from different perspectives. And so just getting back, I was just speaking a little bit about this previous verse from yesterday, that's why I was saying all that. But this verse that we're reading today, how this Mother Earth, she was overburdened by hundreds and thousands of military phalanxes of various conceited demons dressed like kings. So she approached Lord Brahma for relief. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he points out this word, Daitya, which is actually Daitya Anika, which is actually a combination of two words. Daitya, of the demons, and Anika, the military phalanxes of soldiers of the demons. And he explains that these demons called Daityas, what does Daitya mean? It means the sons of Diti. But these specific demons that that are spoken of here are not necessarily the sons of Diti, but they have gained the title of Daityas because they were demonic by action, by their qualities. And Prabhupada, in this purport, he gives a reference to Bhagavad-Gita 4:7. Yada yada dharmasya glani bhavati bharata bhutanam dharmasya tadatmanam sujamyaham. And in the purport to this verse, the Bhagavad-Gita verse that he quotes, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how the Lord, he comes in a scheduled time. And teachings of Lord Chaitanya explain how Lord Brahma's day, which is 12 hours, every 12 hours, is 1,000 Divya Yugas. And the Divya Yuga is 4 Yugas put together. So 4 Yugas times 1,000 is Lord Brahma's 12 hours. And so that's one day of Brahma. Within every day of Brahma, Krishna himself comes in every 28th Divya Yuga at the end of Dwapara Yuga. And also it explains in that book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that Lord Chaitanya comes also every 28th Divya Yuga in a day of Brahma. After Krishna's appearance in Dwapara Yuga, Lord Chaitanya comes in Kali Yuga. So, anyways, so Krishna comes in a scheduled way. And why does he come? We understand that when there's a predominant rise of irreligion, predominant rise of irreligion and a decline in religious practice, Krishna comes himself. And in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining many things. He's explaining how sometimes Krishna comes in different incarnations, Shaktavesha avatars, Manvantar avatars, Leela avatars, but they're all to basically facilitate the same purpose. And he gives the example in this purport. He talks a little bit about Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha was a Shaktavesha avatar, and he was explaining non-violence, preaching non-violence. Then we have even Shankaracharya, even though he's considered like the head preacher of Mayavad philosophy. So Shaktavesha avatar also, he came for a specific purpose to reintroduce the validity of the Vedas. And as I was reading this, I was thinking also so Lord Buddha and Shankaracharya were more or less pretty peaceful people. They were just preaching philosophy. Whereas we have other incarnations such as Parshuram and Kalki, and even Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where it seems like maybe these are violent incarnations. People are getting annihilated. So externally it seems like maybe the process is different, but the function is the same. It's to purify the earth from an overburden of demoniac qualities. And in this last paragraph of this purport of 4.7 that Prabhupada quotes, he explains that the principles of Bhagavad-Gita were spoken to Arjuna, and for that matter to highly elevated persons, because he was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. So in other words, Arjuna was highly elevated in consciousness. He could understand Bhagavad-Gita philosophy. Prabhupada says in 1 hour Krishna spoke the whole Bhagavad-Gita and Arjuna understood it. But we're reading the book our whole life and we can hardly understand. And then he goes on to say, he gives the example that 2 + 2 = 4 is a mathematical principle that is true in the beginner's arithmetic class and in the advanced class as well. But still, there are higher and lower mathematics. So he'll explain what this means, why he's saying that, why is he referring to math. So he goes on to say that in all the incarnations of the Lord, the same principles are taught, but they appear to be higher and lower in varied circumstances. So religion is one, it's the codes of God, the codes of the Lord. But according to time, place, and circumstance, there's different acharyas, there's different incarnations, you have different religions that seem to be teaching a different formula of how to go about attaining self-realization. But the principle is one. It's like, he gives the example of 2 + 2 = 4 everywhere. But this Krishna consciousness philosophy is considered a high form of mathematics or a high form of philosophy compared to some other forms. Just like, for example, just Christianity, if you just read part of the Bible, it seems like it's more or less emphasizing moral codes. Be a good person, don't cheat, don't steal, things like that. Buddha philosophy, don't kill animals. You don't really have to teach the Vaishnavas those things, because those things come automatically in our philosophy. We don't kill animals, we're not supposed to cheat people or steal. So, yes, same thing, just this next verse also applies. I was thinking, Paritinaya sadhanam vinashaya chaduskatam dharma samstapanarthya sambhavami yuge yuge. And Krishna's explaining why he appears, again, to deliver the pious, annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. And Prabhupada, more or less, in the purport, kind of says the same thing in the last purport, how there's different avatars, yuga avatars, etc., purusha avatars, guna avatars, all to fulfill the same purpose, basically. And he was explaining in this verse connected to these purports, I feel like very similar purports in this verse that we're speaking of today. Prabhupada's explaining how that in human life is meant for attaining the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness. And for this reason, Krishna sets up the varnashram system, Chaturvarnya Mayasristam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. And I was just listening to this lecture where actually it's not necessarily a lecture, it's like a documentary that Yadubar Prabhu made of Srila Prabhupada. It's called Following Prabhupada series, and it's 11 videos. They're like 2 or 3 hours long. In one of the videos, I think it was in Melbourne, Australia, I might be mixed up with the areas, but this devotee was explaining how one time Prabhupada was giving this lecture, this public lecture, and many people who were not devotees were there. And there was a group of people in the audience that didn't take the devotees too serious. They were kind of like joking around and being a little bit disrespectful, because maybe they thought we look weird or we act weird. We have shaved heads with little ponytails. So they were kind of giggling to each other. And then before Prabhupada can speak so much, one of these people raised their hand, and in a challenging way he asked Prabhupada the question, what's the point? Why are you even here? What can you do for us? And Prabhupada said, I can save you from death. And the devotee who was explaining this said that Prabhupada said this in such a serious, grave, and sober way. And if you ever watch classes where Prabhupada's speaking, you get to hear him and you get to watch his body language and his facial expressions. It's really actually a life-changing experience to watch a Mahabhagavat, how he speaks. So I could just imagine how grave he looked and how serious he has. He emanates this like power of authority just because of his purity. It's emanating from him that this guy means business, he's serious. So when he said that I can save you from death, the whole audience fell silent, and those people who were joking shut up, they shut their mouths. And they were just, the whole time, the rest of the lecture, they were just attentively listening to Srila Prabhupada, that maybe this guy's for real. Maybe he can save us from death. So, in this purport, Prabhupada is explaining how this is real advancement actually, is to actually get out of the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. And he explains how this modern civilization is misleading people from this actual goal. And he says a few things in this regard. He says that there are rogues and thieves in the guise of protectors who in the name of democracy come to power by hook or by crook. They are preoccupied by arranging for military strength. They spend 65% of the government's revenue for this purpose. So some people may sometimes challenge spiritual or religious people, that you guys don't believe in science or whatever, which is actually a ridiculous statement, because science just means the study of nature, the study of the world, how things work. Different types of science. There's psychology, the study of the mind, biology, the study of the bodies of living organisms. So many sciences, astrology, astronomy. The Vaishnavas are not against science. Actually, we study science every day. The Bhagavatam is full of science. It explains the development of the embryo. It explains the different planetary systems. This is the science of self-realization. So what we don't agree with, which people get mixed up saying we don't agree with science. What we don't agree with is people posing themselves as teachers and experts in different fields of study and leading people into atheistic conclusions. That is what we don't agree with. Atheistic theories. We also do not agree, like Prabhupada is explaining here, that they create, let me find the sentence, they create, he says atomic weapons, and I can't find the sentence somewhere in it, but he's explaining how they, instead of actually understanding the goal of life, they're busy creating weapons, atomic weapons, which is unnecessary. So instead of being able to get people out of the cycle, birth, death, old age, and disease, they're expert at creating things that accelerate old age and disease. Many things are created for material comfort, cause disease. They accelerate death in the form of atomic bombs. And like an easy journey to other planets. Prabhupada is explaining how they spend trillions of dollars to go to the moon, and they just bring back a rock, and everybody looks at the rock, and they say, wow, that's a really nice rock. It's just a waste of time and a waste of money. And some people may question, so what's wrong with studying the world in an analytical way, in detail? But my answer to that would be, what's the point of studying a prison? If you're stuck in a prison and you have a chance to get out by rectifying yourself, but instead of rectifying yourself, you're busy minutely studying the toilets in the prison and looking at all the atoms in the prison, you're completely missing the point. So this is what Prabhupada is explaining here.
the atomic weapons. And in this world, these big weapons that Prabhupada is saying can cause damage, and preparing for the Third World War, weapons of mass destruction. My spiritual master explains that more dangerous than weapons of mass destruction is weapons of mass distraction. Because although the weapons of mass destruction may kill your body, which is inevitably going to die anyways, these weapons of mass distraction will entangle you to get many thousands more bodies and will distract you from the goal of life. And Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad-Gita in a purport how practicing Krishna consciousness is more or less declaring war on the material energy. My spiritual master also explains how the nature of this world is to drag things down, just like gravity. You throw something up, it comes down. If you don't struggle to go uphill, the tendency is to fall down the hill. If you don't go upstream, the water is going to bring you down. So he's explaining in the same way that if we're not striving and struggling to actually advance in our Krishna consciousness and we remain stagnant, the nature of the modes of material nature is that it will drag us back down into a lower consciousness. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains how he suggests how the devotee should be very vigilant and introspective, and he should daily look within himself and see, am I giving up unwanted habits, either gross or subtle? Is my chanting attentive? Am I developing a higher taste in chanting or hearing? And if not, then what's the problem? What am I doing wrong? Am I committing offenses? So analyzing within yourself, Krishna consciousness is an introspective process. I just read this the other day. I was reading with my friend, and he was reading the second canto, and Srila Prabhupada makes the same point here in a purport in the second canto. He's explaining that when the devotee has this bhakti-lata bij, has this creeper of devotion within his heart, he says that the working devotee must always be mindful on a daily basis so that this creeper that has started to grow will not be cut off. And he said, therefore, he should be mindful of the following considerations. And he gives 8 considerations that the devotee should be mindful for. And maybe I won't read all of them just because of time and I have some other things, but I'll summarize at least a few of them. And if anybody wants to read them today, it's Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 30. And he says that number 1, he gives the mad elephant offense. One should be mindful not to commit Vaishnava aparad. Then he says number 2, he must carefully guard against such offenses, the same thing, making sure carefully that you're not offending the Vaishnavas. He emphasizes that twice. Number 1 and number 2 are basically the same thing. Then he says that number 3, if through the watering process some weeds also grow, unless such weeds are uprooted, the creeper of devotion may be hampered. So I used to, I've heard that many times. I used to wonder what those weeds are. How can you identify those weeds within yourself that are growing? And Prabhupada is going to explain that in number 4. He says that actually these weeds are first of all material enjoyment, and that can come in many forms, and it may be very subtle actually. Material enjoyment, the desire to merge with the Absolute, and many other desires in the field of religion, economic development, sense enjoyment, and emancipation. And number 5 is what really stood out to me, because this is something that I could apply with my own life. I see myself falling victim sometimes to a few of these. Prabhupada explains that there are many other weeds, like disobedience to the tenets of the revered scriptures, unnecessary engagements. That's one of the things that stood out to me. unnecessary engagements is actually a weed that will choke your bhakti-lata bij, and that can come in many forms. You can look within yourself to see if all your engagements are necessary or not. The other one is killing animals. It's obvious. And then the other one is hankering after material gain, prestige, and adoration. This is a weed. Hankering after material gain, prestige, and adoration. And I remember hearing my spiritual master speak about this, how sometimes these weeds, they look exactly like the bhakti-lata bij, and unless one is not vigilant, he may mistake the weed for the bhakti-lata bij and be watering the weed. One example, just one or two examples, is someone giving a class. You know, you could speak nicely on the philosophy, you may understand things theoretically, everybody thinks you're a good speaker, and people may even come up after class and say, Prabhu, that was a really amazing talk. You're very learned. I can tell by the way you speak, you're very humble. You've actually understood the philosophy. If at all you take this to heart and you become even a 1% proud, you become, this prestige comes in your heart where you're thinking, people now respect me. People think that I'm a good devotee. This is watering the weed. It's a very subtle thing. And it may seem, like I said, like the bhakti-lata bij. No, I'm giving class, I'm giving the Bhagavatam class, this is purifying. But you're doing so not to glorify Krishna necessarily, but you're actually glorifying your false ego. You're watering the false ego. And this material gain and adoration, prestige and adoration, more or less the same thing. And then Prabhupada goes on to say that if sufficient care is not taken, then the watering process may only help to breed the weeds, stunting the healthy growth of the main creeper and resulting in no fructification of the ultimate requirement, the love of God. It's a very dangerous thing. You don't get the ultimate goal of life by watering these weeds. And then he just goes on to say, therefore we should be very careful from the very beginning of our devotional life. And if for some reason we haven't been careful, like Krishna says that in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, how he explains, Kama esha kora eshe rajaguna samudbhavaha, that this lust is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And in chapter 2 he explains how the fall down of the jiva, when he contemplates the objects of the senses, he develops attachment, and from attachment lust develops. Then he says, so in the very beginning, you should cut off this root of attachment. From the very beginning of when contemplation starts, understand that this is Maya's trick, and do not contemplate the objects of the senses. And even if we've fallen prey in the past, at least from now until for the future, starting now, we can start from the very beginning. Cut this weed off so it doesn't choke our devotional creeper. And with that being said, these weeds can be compared to demoniac tendencies. And when we're reading this verse, text 13 today, is explaining how these demons were overburdening Mother Earth, and Mother Earth had to actually take shelter. She first went to Lord Brahma, then Lord Brahma with the other demigods and Mother Earth, they went to Lord Vishnu to get his shelter and to beg for protection. So I was just thinking that, in Kali Yuga, the same thing like I was saying, how these weeds can be demons. So it's not that we have a couple things that are going on. First of all, we have a world that's run by demonic governments that's giving us disturbances externally. So we're battling with that also. And but the bigger battle is the internal demons that are corrupting the government of our consciousness, or however you want to say it. And I could see within myself how many times when my consciousness or my intentions are impure, I'll recognize that these are impure intentions, and I know I'm not supposed to think like this, but my mind is habituated, almost by force, to think in such a way where I want respect, and I want to be known as, some high devotee or whatever. It's like a natural habit that for many lifetimes my mind has been habituated to think. But if I'm sincere, if anybody's sincere, and although they may have these habituated ways of thinking, if they understand that these demons are burdening me, then you take shelter of Vishnu or Krishna, just like Mother Earth is taking shelter of Vishnu and Lord Brahma. I remember Vaisheshika Prabhu, he gave a class one time, and he said sometimes you just have to press the reset button. And I don't really remember the rest of his talk, but that line really stood out to me, was the reset button. And what I got from that was, just like I was explaining how, I may have impure intentions, or maybe sometimes I get ahead of myself, or sometimes I feel anxiety because maybe I have too much service. You just clear the mind and press the reset button, and you go back to the basics. What are the basics? I'm going to chant my 16 rounds. I'm going to follow the 4 regular principles. I'm going to stay in the association of devotees. I'm just going to try to be a good practicing devotee. I'm no one special. I'm not above anybody. My spiritual master says we should actually see every Vaishnava as better than ourselves. So understanding I'm just the servant of the servant, just another person, just another jiva. It's a very sobering state of mind. And oftentimes Krishna, we understand every thought that comes to our mind is Krishna's mercy. Not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of Krishna. So even with this small realization, press the reset button, go back to the basics, I'm no one special. This is actually Krishna's reciprocation with your sincerity. If you're sincerely trying to be humble, although you may not be truly humble, Krishna will reciprocate with that, give some realizations, like I just said. And I was just thinking, by reading this verse, connecting it with the verse that Prabhupada quotes 4:7 in the Bhagavad-Gita, how this is actually like a common phenomenon, how devotees, when they're in need and struggle, will call out to Krishna and ask for his help. And we have many examples of this in the Bhagavatam. We have Gajendra, and we have Prahlad Maharaj, who's always absorbed in Krishna, although many tribulations were coming, Queen Kunti. But I was even thinking, in somewhat contemporary times, we understand that Advaitacharya, when in Shantipur and in the surrounding area at the time when he was on the earth before Lord Gauranga came, many of the people around were non-devotees. They didn't take Vaishnavism very serious. So understanding that these people are very fallen and they need special mercy, this is why he cried out to Krishna to come. And this is why Krishna came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread the Yuga Dharma. But after Mahaprabhu left, same thing happened. Was when he left the planet, many of the people in Navadvip started to become materialistic again, and the philosophy was somewhat not lost but covered over a little bit, in the sense that many people thought Vaishnavism was, they related Vaishnavism with Sahajiyism. They saw Sahajiyas doing unlawful things, and they equated that with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, and the whole thing got twisted. But when Bhakti-Vinod Thakur came, understanding in a similar way as Advaitacharya, that these people are very fallen, they need some special mercy of Mahaprabhu and Krishna to come and deliver them. This is why Bhakti-Vinod Thakur is actually praying for a ray of Vishnu to come. And we see how all this is related. Prabhupada is explaining how sometimes Krishna comes himself, sometimes he comes as Shakti-Vesh avatars. Understand Bhakti-Vinod Thakur is an empowered divine personality who's come to this world on a mission. So he's praying for a ray of Vishnu to come to help him in his mission of establishing Lord Chaitanya's movement in its proper place of dignity once again, and not only in Navadvip, India, but throughout the whole world. Bhaktivinoda Thakur made many predictions in some of his articles that very soon a personality will come that will bring people from Germany, from France, from America, from all over the world back to Navadvip Dham, where they all together chant Lord Gauranga's holy names. And there was a couple predictions he made in a similar way, that there will be someone who comes, who will travel throughout the world, establishing church, he says non-sectarian churches that will include everybody of every caste, creed, and color to come and chant Krishna's holy name. So when Bhaktivinoda Thakur prayed for this ray of Vishnu, we understand his son, his empowered son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, comes as another form of a Shaktivesh avatar. So understanding Bhaktivinoda Thakur's predictions, understanding that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came to help facilitate those predictions. Bhaktisiddhanta established Krishna consciousness in India in a very powerful way. He was the Singha Guru, the lion guru, very strong, made many devotees, many sannyasis, many preachers to travel throughout India. As I was explaining in a couple classes previous to this one, Bhaktisiddhanta himself made a couple predictions where our Srila Prabhupada would be that personality who fulfilled Bhaktivinoda Thakur's predictions, and even Lord Gauranga Mahaprabhu's predictions. Lochan Das Thakur writes in Chaitanya Mangal a similar thing, that there will be a time in approximately 500 years from now that my Senapati Bhakta, which means my general, my warrior devotee, will travel throughout the world and bring all the people of the world to my lotus feet. So fulfilling the prophecy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, facilitating the prophecy of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, basically coming to facilitate the same prophecy, also made predictions that our A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada was the one to fulfill all those predictions. So, reading from this verse, Paritinaya Sadhunam Vanashaya Chidiskutam, understanding why all these Shaktivesh avatars come to annihilate the miscreants, to deliver the pious. We read in the last paragraph of this verse from Bhagavad-Gita, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how Lord Chaitanya has come in this age of Kali to establish the Sankirtan movement, going from town to town, village to village, and giving freely pure love of God only for the price of one's eagerness and one's sincerity to actually take it. So as I was reading this, I was just thinking how, so Lord Chaitanya is coming in this Kali Yuga. Similarly, in this purport that we're reading today, Prabhupada also says basically the same thing, that this Krishna consciousness movement is an incarnation of Krishna to come into this world, to deliver to deliver all the people of this world. And I remember hearing Vishnu Jan Swami, he used to give this example of Chaitanya's net. He's giving the example just like a fisherman, when he's fishing, he has a large net where he catches thousands of fish just within a few minutes. And Vishnu Jan Swami was given that comparison that Lord Chaitanya's mercy is like a net. It's catching all the jivas, bringing them back to Gauranga Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. And we see how this Krishna consciousness movement, being an incarnation of Krishna, oftentimes is very sneaky. You know, it delivers people without people's acknowledgement sometimes. I've had experiences where on book distribution I have a table in front of me. I'm not kidding you, this has happened at least 2 or 3 times, where people have come up to the table, they see the books, they look at the back cover, they see a picture of Prabhupada, and they just fall silent, their jaw drops, and they say, "Who is this man?" I'm not making this up. This has happened a few times. They say, who is this man? Who is this? And I say, well, that's Srila Prabhupada. It's our spiritual master. He translated all these books. And these people have said, this man has appeared in my dreams. One time, so some person said, last night, this man has appeared in my dreams. And so Prabhupada is somehow mercifully giving people realizations, people that seem unqualified. I remember my friend was explaining another situation. He was in a Spanish area, a lot of Mexican people live, distributing books store to store. He goes into one shop, and the owner of the shop sees the Bhagavad-Gita, and he starts going wild. And he says, he starts yelling Prabhupada's name. And my devotee, my friend, he was kind of bewildered. And this person said, Prabhupada, I got this book many decades ago, but Prabhupada, he comes and he tells me, never forget the living force. Never forget your soul. Always remember Krishna. Prabhupada is appearing in his visions sometimes, according to this man statement. And I remember hearing just the other day in Melbourne, Australia, at a Rath Yatra in the 1970s, what the devotees did was they had this huge statue of Lord Chaitanya. It was really big. I don't remember how big. It was like 10 to 12 feet. And they had it on wheels. I had him on wheels. And he was in front of the procession of the Rath Yatra carts. And the devotees were pulling him. And they made him very shiny. He was like shining gold. And the devotee explaining this was saying how many of the people who came to the Rath Yatra as guests, visitors, were explaining that they saw Mahaprabhu from far away, like a half mile away, and they were attracted. So they just started walking toward this golden figure, and somehow they became wrapped up in this kirtan and this Rath Yatra. But this devotee was explaining that even decades later, he was at their local Govinda's restaurant, and some lady came to the restaurant, and they started having a conversation, this devotee and this one lady. And the lady said, yeah, one time I saw your spiritual master. And the devotee said, oh yeah, when was that? She said, 1970 Rath Yatra in Melbourne, Australia. I remember he was there. And she said, what really stood out to me was that huge golden form, that 10, 12-foot golden form. And she said, ever since then, I never forgot that golden form. She said, for many decades in my dreams, that golden form has appeared to me, dancing in front of the Rath Yatra carts. This Krishna consciousness movement being non-different from Krishna. I remember hearing, man, I have a lot more to say, but time is coming out. But I'll say a few more other things. I remember hearing this interview where Prabhupada arrived in San Francisco, and this reporter was asking, why have you come? And then Prabhupada explains why he's coming, to give spirituality to the people of America. And then this reporter asked, why are so many young people attracted to your movement? And Prabhupada says, well, they have so many material facilities, but I'm giving them the facilities to go back home, back to Godhead. And then the reporter asked, how many devotees do you have? And Prabhupada says, unlimited. He said, I have unlimited devotees. Some admit it, and some don't admit it. He said, if you admit it, then your life is perfect. And I was thinking how all we have to do is cooperate with this Lord's plan of going back home, back to Godhead. The mercy is there. We just have to cooperate. Like the other day, there's this wasp in my room, flying around. I was trying to get this wasp out, but it would not cooperate with me. It didn't know that if it just cooperated, it would go out of the door. It would be free. It would be able to fly. But because of its non-cooperation, it was in bondage. It was stuck in the room, and it probably died that day.
So there's many more things I wanted to say, but I didn't get a chance to say them. And now it's prasadam time. And prasadam is also an incarnation of Krishna. Jai, Srila Prabhupada, Agloy Srimad Bhagavatam, Haribol.